Good afternoon. Welcome to Women in Supply Chain. My name is Ella Kennedy, and I'm on the panel for the Supply Chain Summit, and thank you for coming to this session. Women in Supply Chain, the session is focused on talent, strategies, and supply chain management, touching on topics such as creating role models for upcoming talent, what senior leaders can do to foster career progression in women, how to create a structure for work life, harmony, and unique needs of the millennials, especially millennium mums, women, mothers, women, and to gather perspectives of male colleagues about women in supply chain. The panelists will share their personal stories about their inspirations, challenges they faced, and success stories. This session is put together for all executive level leaders and the upcoming talent to join in and discuss around the specific actions of companies, universities, and professional associations should take to help improve the gender balance in supply chain in the coming years, including ideas on mentoring, recruiting, job design, cultural awareness, and anything else that might help young talent, specifically women, entering the field to thrive. I would like to introduce the moderator for this session. You've just heard her in the main ballroom, Aki Natarajan, correct?
Adi Natarajan.
Okay, thank you. She is the founder of the USC Women in Supply Chain organization. What a fabulous organization, and what a great organization to have present here at USC. And actually, I will just turn it over to her now, and she will introduce the panelists.
Thank you, Ella. Thank you, everyone. So this is going to be perfect conversation style breakout session, unlike the standard orchestrated planned session. The panelists are going to be very honest. So you guys come up with any questions you have. It's going to be pure conversation style. It's pre-cocktail preview. So I would like to request the panelists to actually introduce themselves. So starting off with Philippe.
Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Philippe Lambout. I'm Senior Vice President of Logistic Global Supply Chain in Mattel. I've been 2 years with Mattel. Before that, I was 21 years with Kraft Foods, and before that, 3 years with Procter & Gamble. So thank you for having me, Ati.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Vicki Mortimer. I'm the Director of Operations focused on launch at Amazon.com. I've been with Amazon for close to 17 years now and have worked in a variety of different positions within the company.
My name is Kelly Ahmet. I'm the Vice President of Sales for UPS. I handle 22 states, so the western half of the country. I'm married with 2 children. I've been with UPS 25 years and relocated about 6 times, so I can share some of that insight with you. I look forward to the discussion.
Hi, I'm Sarah Pfaff. I'm a principal with EY. I actually run our North American outsourcing advisory practice, but I've also been a longtime supply chain and procurement consultant, having both stepped out and done a .com, as well as worked at other firms in a nice long career. So happy to talk about this life.
Good afternoon. My name is Amy Forte. I work for Toyota here in Torrance. I have been with the company for a little over 26 years, primarily in various nodes within the supply chain. So I've hit just about every node in the supply chain on the parts and accessories side of the business. So I've had a lot of different experiences that I'm very happy to share. I also have three young children, so happy to share any insights.
Fantastic. Thank you, panelists, and thank you, Philippe, for being brave enough to come among You're helping us prove that this is not just about women and having women run the whole show. So I'd like to start off with personal stories. Now all of us having known that you've broken that glass ceiling. If you could give us your personal story on what you did, how challenges you faced, how did you overcome that, and how did you ultimately get up there? So if you can start with Amy.
Certainly. So I was sharing with Ati that I started at the company. I was rather young, right out of college, and I came into it in a procurement role. I had some analytical background and some internships and so forth, and became a subject matter expert in that area, specifically on the accessory side of Toyota's business, and realized after spending many, many years in procurement that I really needed to diversify in order to move up, because I was interested in progressing within the company, and was mentored and advised to hit as many nodes in the supply chain as I possibly could. So I spent many years in logistics, both on the planning side and the operations side of the transportation piece, and in various planning roles. But the most challenging role, and probably one of the highlights of my career there, was actually working in the operations. And in Toyota, I think many of you probably have heard about Toyota Production System and some of our principles of going to the shop floor, Genji Genbutsu, actually seeing where the work takes place so that you can understand how to best make improvements. And all of the years that I was in accessories and in logistics, I was making decisions that impacted the parts distribution centers. And I really wanted to go there. And it's not typically a place that women in our organization, try to get to, because it's kind of a big warehouse, it's industrial. At the time, it was a little bit dirty. Now it's beautiful. It's fully rejuvenated. But I asked for that assignment. It was a developmental rotation that was supposed to last about 6 months. I ended up being there for many years. But it was a eye-opening experience, being one of the only women working in a facility of about 250 people. The Los Angeles Parts Distribution Center is located here in Torrance, and it's a Teamster, it's a unionized facility, so it was quite a project for me to understand what I needed to do as a woman, and being one of the only women leading this team of men primarily, and had a lot of growth, a huge development experience for me, and really one of the highlights of my career.
That's fantastic. Thank you, Amy. Sarah, if you could share your personal stories.
Yeah, as I think about, I think my professional career and even my personal career is a little bit of a random walk. But I think it's highlighted by, I apparently always say yes, and I never say no. And so when I think back of how I started, if I just give you my quick background, I actually started in marketing. I studied marketing. I loved marketing. That was my desire. I went into a bank because that was the first job offer I got, so I said yes. Eventually I went ahead and stopped doing that and went to business school, and in business school I went into consulting, and along the way was blessed with always being given opportunities, which I just constantly, I don't think I knew to say anything but yes. And eventually I got recruited to a firm that is very well known in the procurement advisory space. Frankly, I thought I was going there to help them become marketing consultants. I did not realize that I was actually going to go to the other side, and ended up loving being on the procurement side. So once again, yes, my first and maybe one of my more challenging strategic sourcing projects was actually sourcing the flower arrangements in the bank branches, believe it or not, way back when. And I had great ideas that they all thought I was just, off the charts, but I was determined to save them money on their flower arrangements. Went on, and I started a .com. Again, it was a yes. A colleague asked me to step out, and we started a reverse auction company. And that kind of then began the entrepreneurial. And somewhere in about the last 5 years, frankly, so this is kind of an interesting random walk where I then started doing outsourcing advisory, and I finally sat back and I said, maybe I should think about it, right? So instead of being really methodical and planned, I just let it evolve. And decided at that point I really wanted to actually have a kind of complete and full career as a partner in consulting, and ended up at EY. Through this journey, I've also had 2 kids. And I'm proud to say now one's in college and one's almost in college. We're real close there, real close. One more year and we're there. And so it's just been, but I think where I've had a lot of really fascinating experiences as a female and a young female being thrown into opportunities, whether it was literally being the person laying off a unionized workforce at a manufacturing plant, all the way through to running and building practices and building .coms now. But I think, kind of having that you don't say no when you just assume you can gets you an awful long ways.
Great comments, great comments.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Thank you, Sarah.
Well,
You know
thank
what?
you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Top of that, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. You know, I think so much of my background is very similar to what has already been said. I studied international business, and never did I think I'd be in transportation. Started as an import-export manager and studied overseas, and just really loved being an import-export manager, and then got to understand supply chains. And as you start to understand them, you really get intrigued by them. So I started working for CF Air Freight at the time, Emery Worldwide, merged a few companies together back then. For those of you who know the transportation business, there's been a lot of mergers. Decertified unions, worked with unions, and then got recruited by UPS, which is really rare, because at UPS almost all the promotion comes from within. So I had a similar situation. I got to UPS and needed to learn the operation. So I went down and ran what we call a center, and about 100 unionized drivers at that point, and had just a phenomenal time doing that. And then I think I said yes to a lot of things. You know, just a lot of special assignments where I worked all around the country, and then again, the relocations was a big challenge with a husband and 2 kids, and making sure that everything flows the right way. And then have just enjoyed every bit of what I've learned, right? And I've learned continuously. So I would just always say keep learning. And I'll turn it over to Vicki.
Okay, and I'm going to reiterate some of the same things, but I'm going to start with very, very important to have foundational knowledge across the breadth of what your organization does, so that you can then use that to continue growing in the organization. Saying yes, obviously, is much better than saying no, but I think there's times that you have to say no, and I have said no, because you have to make choices in your life, and you have to balance both the professional and your personal life, and only you can do that. When I go back and I think about pivotal moments in my career, the first one that I can remember is when I realized that I had to ask for something that I wanted. And that's one of the core differences between males and females. That comes naturally to a lot of the male population, to ask for what they want, to go after it and be very aggressive. Aggressive women normally aren't looked at very, very nicely. But we have to find a way. We have to find a way to say, I want to do this, and propose it in a way that it's hard to say no. And I did that, and that, I think, changed the trajectory of my career. And then the second thing that I did differently was I chose mentors that were male to help me learn what I didn't know, what didn't come naturally to me. So it would forge a good relationship, and because your mentor should help you where you need help. And so those are the 2 things when I look back at my career that I know where I made decisions that helped me rather than hindered me. I'm sure I made a lot that hindered me, but those were good ones. And I tend to, make sure that I let folks know that you control your career. Your decisions and your actions really will help you embrace your full potential.
Thank you, Vicki. Philippe?
Well, actually, one of the personal experience that I have is actually as a European, and they may be a bit out of the, but when you're in Europe, you tend to think about the gender diversity as an American challenge. And when I grew up, I'm from Belgium, I rose through the rank in Belgium, and then was transferred about 20 years ago, first time in the US. And we had discussion around how to evolve the career of our senior executive, obviously, like many of you, I assume, in your company have. And actually, what woke me up, literally, was a VP, where she started to challenge what I was saying, and the way I was talking about women. And the point was, when you talk about women, very often, it's like, she needs to have one more job before she can be promoted. And the point was, you never say that for a man, you just take a risk. Mm-hmm. And the flip side of what Vicki just said is, women actually sometimes do accept that. And so I like what you said about asking for that. And so fast forward a few years back, I actually went and I had a senior management meeting with my team. And I came into the room, and the only woman was a VP, and she was American and had brought her there, and it struck me like a ton of brick that this is clearly not an American problem. And every time I just was in Europe for a business trip 2 weeks ago, this is clearly something that we're speaking here in the US, people are being targeted upon. I do believe very firmly in incentive. I'm very proud that in my team, I've got 50% of all VP are actually women. And you have to walk the talk. You have to coach women. And I think we can talk about how you move through this, but you do have to walk the talk. Otherwise, you can always find excuse for just one more job before that person is going to get promoted.
Fantastic. Those were some very intriguing insights. Thank you for sharing your personal stories. I'd like to move on again. If we can hear from Philippe, what has been your perspective? Being a male, from your angle, what have you seen women doing right, and what have we been missing out, or what can we do, to break this glass ceiling, Philippe?
Well, a couple of things. I think very often, Amy alluded to it, when you're in the manufacturing environment, when you go out there in the field, you are very often, and we had plant manager as women that we put into a place where everybody was a man, everybody. And that's tough, and you don't get a lot of training for that. So what we did at Kraft Foods at the time, it was to create a network where mentor is important, but just pick up the phone and what do I say to the person who just told me that? And what we did really worked, and at the time I was asked to be very pleased, honor, I was actually the first man to be asked at Kraft to be the supply chain women, executive sponsor. And that's how through those experiences, we started to develop a network where women could pick up the phone and they would feel it's not about them. It's an experience where you need help. You don't want to feel alone. That's number one. Number two, we talked about expectation. We said yes, say no. I found that very often women don't get their fair share. We talked about advancement planning. Women don't get their fair share of clear feedback. And so very often there is an undertone where keep doing what you're doing, you'll be fine. And what we found is at the very junior level, women didn't get the constructive feedback they needed. And I sat down as an executive with women or discussing about women that had apparently a training of improvement opportunity for 6, 7, 10 years they actually never heard about. That became a very blocking to a career terminating. But this is something that as a woman we coach, you have to ask a very clear assessment, development plan, because just by playing nice, you're not going to get that. And I totally agree with we had at Kraft the saying, you can fill in the words. We have Betty B, and we have 90 nice. And you have, the women it's very tough between, if you're too nice, you're really Nancy nice, and you're being trumped over. If you're Betty bitch, you're basically going to be set aside. And that's exactly the trend that we want. I said it, right? But it's really about working through that fine line and coaching women to do that properly. That's my experience.
Fantastic, thank you. And we'll censor that later on.
Hopefully we destroy this piece of
So I have another question for the for the entire panelists again. As we have more millennials coming in, millennial moms, they're soon gonna be having kids or want to have kids. So what would be your tips or ideas or suggestions for how to create this work-life harmony, which we all struggle with? So what would be your advice for them, and also millennial dads, because they're also entering the field, and we have to work in unison in this. So what would be your advice for how do we create this work-life harmony, and how do we make our partners real partners, like Sandberg says?
Sure, I'll go first. I think what you have to remember, these are personal decisions, and nobody can make them for you. The person next to you may not agree with your decision, and that's okay, right? So throughout your career, you own your career. No one is more interested in it than you are, except maybe your spouse, so maybe they are. But they need to be a part of that decision-making process. And what's right for you today may not have been right for you 5 years ago, may not be right 4 years from now. But at every point, you need to stop and think, what are the pros and cons? What's more important to me at this point in time? Is it more important for me to start my family, or is it more important for me to get to this next level and then start my family? Those are the decisions that face you, and they're real decisions. They face quite a few of us. Luckily, I'm past those now. But what you need to do is realize that nobody will make the decision for you, And inevitably, when you make it, there'll be people that will criticize you, and that's okay. Because you're not out to please them, you're out to please yourself.
I always find it interesting because people ask me all the time, how did you balance? And they go like this. And I said, I never did this. It was always like this, right? Because there's times when I had to give, 24 hours a day to UPS, absolutely. But then I got my time back somehow, right? And those were the times then I gave 24 hours to my family. And you just have to be able to have a supportive spouse, helps a lot, obviously, or partner, but you have to be able to do this because you'll never get this. It just doesn't work. So I think the decisions you make have to be yours because you have to be happy with the decisions you make. But it's very important to not think of some standard out there like this, because I just don't think it exists. And things change throughout your life. I just had a baby grandchild, very excited about. It's shifting again for me a little bit, right? I'm spending a little bit more time with that grandbaby, and it's exciting. So, I think things shift for everybody as they go through phases in their life.
I guess it's interesting. I would say maintain perspective, stop stressing on it and trying to figure it out and plan out the next 10 years every day and figuring out that 362 days from now, I'm going to, it's like, I have so many millennials come to me and they will ask me the question around, how do you balance having a baby? And I'll say, well, I didn't even know you were married or had a guy. No, I don't. They don't even, they're not even with anybody. So they are like 5 years ahead of when this might even remotely be relevant. And I say, well, maybe this is not today's problem, right? It's like, just let things kind of happen. So I definitely think there's a lot of kind of take the pressure off of yourself. And I think we put way too much angst on it, which then gets us spinning in our minds, and it's not worth it. And then I do think it is, like I said, maybe I'm just an optimist, right? I did not have, I have to be honest, I'm not the one that has the supportive husband who, makes all the lunches. I still make the lunches, It's like, I'm waiting for the phone call now about what am I going to make for dinner, because those are the kind of things I still get, right? It's like, what are you thinking about for dinner at about 4 o'clock in the afternoon and I'm not home, right? They're like, we have nothing in the refrigerator. Oh, really? Yeah. There is a grocery store around the corner. So I do think, but when you get into the work life, I think we are amazing people at balancing. And I can honestly say I haven't missed any event of any of my kids that I wanted to be at. My kids played sports. And I would work my schedule, and I watch everybody. And I coach a lot of the women around this, because I watch men do this too. They're there at 3 o'clock in the afternoon coaching their kids' little league baseball team, and they're not stressing and saying, how am I going to manage my work life and be there? It's like they just do it. And they just make it work. And so I think a lot of, you will find, and especially now in this day and age with telecommuting and a supportive workforce and a lot of other things, you really can create, and is it this or is it this? It's a juggling act, but it will juggle over the course of time, and you'll look back and you'll say, I think it worked out.
And from my perspective, I think I'm really big into outsourcing, not at work, but at home. I outsource a lot. I have a really great staff. Some of the staff includes, husband, parents. We have fortunately have a really great nanny that we've had for a long time. So I outsource everything that's not value added. Doing laundry, I add no value to that. Going to the market, I need to be spending my time with the kids doing value. If I miss work for a morning to go work in their classroom, I make sure that it's not going to be cutting papers in the office. I want the kids to see me when I'm in the room so that they know. So that little bit of time that I'm able to slice out, that they actually know that I'm there and they see. And the other stuff that's not as important, cutting papers and doing laundry, that's for somebody else. I hate to say it. I also think that we live in an age where we have the opportunity, especially with millennials, because millennials like workplace flexibility. They don't like stodgy workplaces with cubicles that you have to go to and sit in every day. So I think we would need to take advantage. It's a little bit challenging in the supply chain environment because supply chains run 24 hours a day. But we have this great ability and great technology now where new moms, new dads might be able to work from somewhere other than the office. And I think I know my company is starting to take advantage of that, and I think companies need to think about that.
If I supply chain, because I've been in it for over 20 years. Since yesterday. You know, I think as a woman and having a child who's now 11 going into junior high, I do have a great partner. It does take a community. I love what you say about being in the class, because she recently said to me, you know, it was so cool that all through elementary school you came in the class once in a while, or you did those things. But I think as a woman, when I had a child, I found that I could do things I never thought I was capable of doing, because you didn't have a choice, right? If you're going to continue working and you're going to raise this child and have a home and all those things, you do it because you do it, right? I mean, why is that any different than people going to college? You look back and think, oh my gosh, you know, I worked 2 jobs, I went to school full time. How did I do it? You did it because you didn't have a choice, right? You put yourself in that position, and that was a good thing, and it helped for the future. And I love what you say, like, don't plan 5-10 years from now, you know? And if you think that, you know, you can plan to have a child until you afford it, good luck. So this topic is just awesome. It's so refreshing here.
I think that's very true, that we unconsciously put arbitrary limits around ourselves.
Yeah.
And we shouldn't. We should make sure that we blow through those. We don't even think about that. We shouldn't think about we can't do something.
Right.
We should always be saying, well, why can't we?
Right.
Let's go after it.
Yeah.
Because if you fail, you'll just dust yourself off and go back after it again.
And I love what you say, though, about, you know, that Nancy, nice Nancy, and the other side. If you're going to be in supply chain, any farm logistics, or I do global trade finance, you better have thick skin. That's all I have to say.
Yeah.
I mean, if you can't, if you're afraid to be a tree that's going to fall, then you might want to go back to farming.
Agreed, Ari. At the same time, I think there's a thread here with the last point is about women sometime, in my experience, when you discuss and you interview, are trying to be perfect. And a man will never try to be perfect. And we often, they're far from me, right? So
And that's coming from a man.
what I found is for themselves, they set the bar so high that they say, I'm never going to make it. Therefore, you know, I just had the case, unfortunately, a couple of weeks ago where I had a lady who was on track to become a VP just left because she was commuting an hour and a half. And we actually never talked. And she went to a very small local company where she has a 10 minutes commute. But my frustrations, we never talked about how do we work around that, right? She felt she had to show up at the office all the time and work 12 hours a day in the office. And that was, frankly, very impossible to do. So I think it's about being imperfect and accepting that.
I found, too, that, candidly, I became a better employee after I had a child, because I was putting this amount of time into her, but then I felt like, well, if I put this amount of time into her, then I've got to give back, because I'm working at a place that's giving me the flexibility to be like that. So, again, you know, you're never going to have that balance. It's always the peaks and the valleys.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
Fantastic. So actually, before I go to my last prepared question, I'd like to open it to the entire forum. And if you guys have questions, bring them forth.
Okay, I have one. So this is about finding mentors and having people give you advice. So what Victor was saying about having a mentor, how do you approach someone to be your mentor, ask them, you know, in a professional manner, and then what do you expect to gain from them? Because a lot of times, you know, I'll go and talk to my managers or someone in the executive level, and I'm just like, okay, here's my work, you know, thanks for the feedback, but I don't get to ask, you know, what can I gain from having this communication from you?
I think, you know, it's a very good question. And you just come up and you ask somebody. So you have to be bold and ask, but you have to remember what's in it for them. Because the mentor has to get something back. It's not just about what you get. Because any person that is worth being a mentor probably has a lot of people asking them also for that same piece of time. So you have to make that half an hour or hour very important to them as well. So it's a two-way street. So again, you have to own part of this, but don't stress. Just go up and ask. Have some sort of starting relationship to work off of first. So please don't go up to a complete stranger and ask to be, you know, please be my mentor, because there's absolutely nothing that person can do for you. So start from a point where you have some relationship there.
But having said that, I would also say it's nice if you can get someone with a different perspective. So outside your function, or, you know, that can really give you a good critique, and then you get that feedback that Philippe was talking about, because I've seen that a million times too. Men have a hard time giving women straight feedback, and we need feedback to get better. So look outside your function, whatever that is, and get some more.
I would also, you know, again, and I think asking, you'll be surprised. I mean, I'm stunned. Even now, I'll get myself all wigged out about asking someone for something, and then I ask them, and they say, okay, and I'm like, oh, really?
Yeah, that's easy.
Almost shocked, right? But I think the other piece that is real important, I'm a big fan of know your strengths. So, you know, not to do an advertisement for a strengths finder, but I have everyone I work with, have always tell them, go do strengths finder and come in and talk to me from a position of what do you think you're good at? What do you think you're strong at? And I guarantee you, even people right out of USC have strengths. There are things that you are good at. And I can mentor you if you put it into a context of, I think I'm really good here. And I'm going, oh, well, let's talk about that. Then I can help coach, I can help create opportunities, I can do something. And what's really hard is when someone comes and just says, hello. It's like, well, nice to meet you too. So you do have to bring something to the discussion, and I think more often than not, most everyone I've ever run into, it's the rare person who says, no, I don't want to work with you. And if they say that, then say, thank God you found that one out, right? Because that's someone to stay away from.
And I would add, I'm a big fan of informal mentorships. So I have many mentors. One of them is in the room. Amy is back there. But I have more informal mentors. So if I'm having a struggle, something in work, something in business, and I don't know how to get past the hurdle, I'll just go in the gut, not really the guys, I truly need help, but I'll go to ask a question. And it'll be usually an informed question. I'll usually do some research first. And that sparks a new relationship often, because maybe this isn't someone I interface with normally. And that oftentimes can lead to a second short meeting to follow up on that question, and ultimately into, you know, more of a long-term relationship. So that's a good way to, I think, open the door if you're starting from ground zero. And it takes away that awkwardness of, will you be my mentor? Because you're really going with a legitimate business question.
Yeah.
Plus, it's just flattering to be asked. I mean, if somebody thinks highly enough of you to come up and ask for your help, or what your thought is on something, because you've been doing it for a long time, that's flattering.
But I think there's a pivotal point here, which is great. You're asking for help. You're asking for input. You're asking for thoughts. You're not asking to get married. And I think the problem when we say mentor, it almost, we create, again, a label that makes it intimidating to do.
Yes.
Would you be my mentor?
Yeah.
That's a lot. That's
Forever.
That's like, it's like, but if I went and if I said, hey, look, here's what I'm thinking, can I bounce some ideas off of you? Or I don't even know what I'm thinking, I just have an issue. That's a whole different, that's help. That's asking for help. And then the relationship grows.
But I think that also goes along with your networking, right? I mean, look around. These are the people that you're going to come across, because all of us that have been doing this business for a long time, I walked in here and it was like a mini reunion.
Yeah.
Oh my God, how have you been? I've seen you 10 years. Still very good. I mean, LinkedIn, you know, I mean, social media, all that kind of stuff. I mean, because that will help gear you in a way that you might find stuff you didn't even know was in there.
Thank you. I think Keith had a question, and then I'm going to come to you.
Actually, just a comment. I'm a partner at EY. I work with Sarah, and she would vouch that we're very big on mentorship and women, diversity, and all that. And this is a true story. About 5 years ago, I was facilitating a roundtable down in Orange County, and I made a comment, you know, to the panel or to the attendees that I had a very important baseball game to go to. That my son was playing in a very important game, and I needed to be home at a certain time
Fantastic. Thank you for sharing that, Keith. I'm going to take that question, then I'm going to come to you.
Not so much a question, but a statement on mentoring. At Cal Poly, you were talking about how you solicit mentors and things like that. And one thing they mentioned was if you really like something that someone's doing really well, like if this person, you like the way she's approaching business, but you notice that how well she organizes her schedule. So you start with that. Can you mentor me on how you organize your day? And it helps you with that, and that's kind of an in on, and it starts a conversation on how to go further into that person's career or how they developed into who they are. But you start with something that's a strong suit for them, and it helps you in many ways. And then I like what Amy said was you research that thing you're interested in developing, like let's say organization. You know you look at how to organize yourself. You look at all this. So when you go speak to her, you could speak to that and be ready to say, well, they plan this way or that way, and how do you do it? And and then you have something, a base again, but you're researching before you hit them up on their time.
That's a good tip. Thank you for sharing.
Good afternoon. My name is Dan Gardner. I'm president of a supply chain consulting company called Trade Facilitators. And I noticed that the women on the panel all come from different backgrounds and have different experiences and all very successful. So I certainly applaud you for that. But one common characteristic that I noticed is that I believe the woman from Amazon, 17 years, 25 at UPS, 20 plus.
23 years of service.
So are you calling us old? Is that what you're doing?
I like that.
Mature.
I'm certainly not saying that. But if you believe statistics, and this is applicable to young men and women, that younger people coming into the workplace are going to change jobs, they're going to change careers 10 times, 12 times. So with that lack of continuity that you've enjoyed, how would you recommend to the young women and men here to manage a career, be it from a mentorship perspective or a career planning perspective, when it's a given that the disruption time-wise is going to be greater than what you perhaps experience?
For me, that's simple. I'm sorry.
Well, and I was going to say, because I have changed a lot, right? So I haven't been at one company all this time. I've been at, I could probably, don't want to count how many, but I have moved around. I would say the key is don't burn a bridge, right? Absolutely. I don't care how much you hated the person, the company, the project, the whatever, don't burn the bridge. And then I think you'll be amazed. People, it's a small community when we really get down to it, right? And so moving around just means you've increased your network. And so I look at it not as a negative. It's one of those, okay, I know all the people from where I was, and now I know a whole lot of people in a new place. And over time, that is the other thing. I think it's just your reality. So maintain that network, and your mentor at your old company can still mentor you at your new company. So you don't lose those kind of relationships. So, sorry, yeah, go for it.
At UPS, we're so large that there are multiple different business units within UPS. So what I try to get people to realize is sometimes you don't even have to leave your current company. You can just get a different position within the company. That absolutely broadens you out and gives you new experiences, and you can continue to refresh yourself. So when I think about it again, I've lived all over the country, different states, ran different parts of UPS, from the corporate office to the regional offices to the district offices. So all those things just refresh you and make you feel like, oh, it's something new. So I'm fortunate. So if you're in a large company, look for those types of opportunities to grow rather than always just looking outside, because I think there's a lot internally.
Yeah, and the only thing I can say is do what you love. Doesn't matter what company it's in. If you really love it, then stay with it. Don't feel the pressures from outside to change because all the other millennials are doing that. If you love what you're doing, stay doing it, because you will continue to grow as a person, and you will find ways to grow your professional career as well.
But I think, and I go back to the diversity at the start of your comment. While we might all look similar because we're, the four of us are females, we actually all did have different career trajectories. And I think it's important not to think it's just one way, that you have to be, long-term person at the company, because that's the one one dot point doesn't make a trend, right? I mean, I'm not even sure 2 dot points necessarily make a trend. So understand, we all got here in a lot of different ways, and that means there's just as many ways for everyone out there.
And chances are you're not going to become a director or a VP in 3 years. I think it's safe to say.
Everyone wants to.
Or it's safe to say you're going to have to put some time in. So I don't think it's unusual that we have time in.
But I think the thing is too, is when you talk about, because I'm in technology, I mean, we change jobs every 3 to 5 years. It's just because that's what it is, because of where the products go. But not only do you carry that network, but you also carry that reputation, right? I mean, you own that. So if you've burned a bridge, like you said, guaranteed somebody's going to say, yeah, I met Derry, move on. You know, or, oh yeah, I worked with her for 4 years, but, you know, things changed, we had to diversify. Maybe there was a merger and acquisition, we know that happens all the time, somebody was bought, somebody went under, but that's what you carry with you too, is that reputation. So if you're good to the people around you and you treat everybody the same, right? From the janitor up, always like my father told me, you know, you fall back on your laurels too.
At the same time, on maybe the asking for yourself, I've seen way too many, especially with women, when women are very high performing, people have a tendency to keep them and not move them around. So one of the things that I've seen is we've had actually in companies to incentivize, and I know we're all good example and you probably all do that, but sometime I've seen that people get stuck, or women especially have been way too long in the same job. So I think at the same time, if you can move around, like you said, that's fine. But on the same thing as you manage your own career, if you feel you're losing momentum, don't spend X years doing the same thing, because those years are not going to come back.
Yep. Thank you, Philippe. Yes.
I don't know if it's just me, but recently I've been really lucky in that when I changed into supply chain, I have a manager, actually both my managers, be really open with where they see my capability. And that in itself opened my eyes to being able to possibly break the ceiling only because somebody else had that belief. And if it wasn't voiced, I would be content being a performer at the level of that. So I think for all the younger people coming into the job, have that confidence and have others, not just mentors, but others leading the company, just voice that you have the capability and the path in front of you. It'll make a world of difference. Because now I see my role and future change dramatically just by a few words.
You found your champion.
You know, for people here that are in large organizations, I mean, UPS has really valued diversity for a long time, but now really has moved into inclusion and that intentional fostering, right, of talent, and especially female talent, minority talent, all those types of things. So I think that is a critical piece for companies as well. How are you going to foster it, and what are you doing to be intentional about it? And I know we've got a lot of different groups at UPS and a lot of development planning that we do with people that have, you know, desires to move up. And I think that's really critical for organizations.
And I would just, to your comment, I would add 2 things back. One, don't use the word maybe you're just lucky. Maybe you're actually good, you know? So take luck, it's not luck, it might be you. And then 2, pay it forward. So since they're doing that to you, the way we're going to make a change is we pay it forward. So you turn around and do that for someone else.
Thank you. Mitch, you had a question?
Hi. My name is Mitch Chavez. I work for Northrop Grumman. We almost saw our VP dance. I had a question. So I've been with Northrop Grumman in my recent experience with a few other companies. So I actually love, and I apologize, I don't know your name, the point that you made about staying within your organization, not having to go outside to grow, not being siloed in your position, but potentially looking at other things, right? I'm in supply chain now, but I can look at business management, I can look at finance, I can look at lots of other things. So I love that point. I intend to stay with Northrop Grumman for the rest of my career, and I'm doing that. I'm able to jump to different positions, and it's great. But it's a challenge
I'll speak for Toyota. Toyota is not famous for really fast advancement or fancy titles or, you know, that kind of thing. So some millennials that come in, some younger people that come in can get frustrated. But I think what we do really well, and we do have very high retention, you know, 26 years, and I'm not unusual at all. It's all about developing people. And to your point about moving around within a large company, giving them those opportunities to learn something new every few years. I'm a firm believer in you really have to stay in a job enough time to learn everything you can learn and do Kaizen, make improvements. And once you do that, you're ready to move on. So I think I personally try to encourage that. But then when it's time to move, let's find that next great opportunity. It might not be in my division, it might be in marketing, it might be in information systems or somewhere else. But I think development and proactive development is one really good mechanism to do that.
We even at UPS, another thing we do is we have a lot of philanthropic type of committees and philanthropic work that we do. So for example, if we have a high potential person, we will give them committee roles, leaders of our committees, right? So that they get visibility with a larger group of executives than just their group. So we try to do that to make sure that the high potential person gets developed, and also that, again, we understand who they are and know what they're looking for. And certainly, like Toyota, you know, we don't have big titles, we don't necessarily pay this huge salary immediately, but we do a lot with deferred compensation as well, so that staying is good, right? So it's perceived as good at UPS too. So again, we try to keep them challenged and try to keep people learning at UPS all the time.
Yeah, and in Amazon, we talk about it a lot. It's very, very important. It is very much about development, but we have very deep conversations about where our talent lies and what do we need to do to really help them blossom. We talk about stretch roles a lot. How do we help you get to the next level, probably quicker than you thought you should go? Obviously provide safety nets. But you know, start the conversation early, identify those high potential folks, and help create the path for them. Because Amazon is a growing company, our future is in how well we do this. It's very important.
And lastly, you have to be careful because Deborah here is leading our global talent management and supply chain, so she can be speaking about it much better than we do. But it's really about first knowing where you are. Like it's about the 3x3, you know, performance and potential. And it's being very open about where you are in that matrix. Because indeed, when you have high potential, we have a number of quadrants where this is the one where we as a leadership team in our supply chain are gonna have to develop a plan. And you need to be purposeful because sometimes people do want, I don't know how many people come to me and say, I want to be an expat, regardless of the investment, that person may not be the one you want to invest in. So you first have to get it right about the assessment and the agreement. And then number two, you have to have, especially for the highest potential, you have to have a systematic plan. And some of my previous company, we had a plan for literally at least tentative up to 3 assignments in advance. And that was 5 years. And that could change. But at least you could not say, okay, that person is going to be an SVP and just yes, sure, but that SVP job, there is no pass because you've not developed as a leadership team one. So you need, it's a mutual agreement between the employee and expectation management from the employer.
Just I want to round it back out. So at EY, we also, and I think kind of the common theme, it's really all about engagement and development. And so we as well have very robust conversations around performance at every single person. For we're a 250,000 person firm. We still have performance discussions for everybody. We then put in very kind of actionable development plans, individual, and then it's just a lot of engagement. And I guess I would turn it the other way. So I think we represent some great companies up here that actually have really invested in this kind of, and kind of retaining and growing. And if you're at a company, whoever it is, if you're not feeling that, if it's not working and you're not feeling engaged, first, before you walk away and say, I'm out of here, you might want to kind of raise your hand and understand, because this is really kind of, this is not just leading practice, this is kind of common practice. Most companies are really focused on high potential, retention, development. So if you're feeling a little bit off, then I would suggest find someone to talk to, because your company may have programs. You just may somehow have missed it.
Fantastic. I know this is a very exciting conversation. We'll take one last question, and then I'll finish up with my question, and we'll have more conversation at the cocktail hour, I guess. Yes.
This is a question for the panel. I'd like to hear what the most significant career lesson is so far that you've learned to date. And I'll first share mine. I've been in industry for 15 years, came from a consulting background as well, now work for a third-party logistics company. And what I've recognized is that if I had to do it all over again, I probably would continue my progression working for high-performance companies rather than those who are financially struggling, because it changes the culture where it's detrimental to talent retention in general. And my personal teams have struggled as a result of that. So when I meet millennials, that's usually the first thing I'd say is when you're going out and looking for your first job out of grad school, make sure that it's a growing, prospering, continuing developing company that will continue to support this, for multiple years. But I'd like to hear from your all perspective.
Interesting perspective.
What you've learned.
Well, there's lots of things. I've learned a lot of things. The one thing that I think has been most significant for me is that, I've watched people succeed alongside me, and I've looked at what I try to do for myself, and I think there's two different types. There are people who will step on people to get to the top. And I find that, and I'll watch it, and they crumble very quickly, right? And then there's people who get pushed to the top because they really work with their group well. They create a team environment. They have open communication, and they develop their people, and their people just naturally push them up. Those are the leaders that stay at the top, and those are the leaders that truly make a difference. So, me too, I'm all about the people development, as a lot of us are, and I think that's the one thing I've learned is that servant leadership piece is big for me. It's really big, so that's the one thing I would learn.
I guess I have two. One is I've had to learn to let go, right? Let go of some of what were even real or not real slights, right? I mean, I've actually, I've been kicked off a project. I've actually been laid off of a company. So I've had my own share, and I had to let them go, right? You had to kind of finally just put it away, own it, move on, and stop stewing about it, because I think that's something we can do really easily. The second one is, and this is really something that's just finally popped on in the last 5 years, is just start asking. And it's amazing. I have to be honest, it was a year ago, and I told one of my colleagues that, but I actually went into, my boss's boss, and we were talking about a lot of different things, and he said, well, what is it you want? And I go, well, actually, I'd like to report to you. And I mean, to ask for, to really put it out there, and then I was like, oh my God, I can't believe I said that, right?
He said, okay.
What?
He said, okay.
Yeah, but it's like asking, right? It's really something that we just don't do. And I think more often than not, even if you don't get your ask, what you've done is you've positioned you've said, here's someone that's asking for something. I might not be able to give it to you, but I'll at least now have you on the list of when I can do other things for you, I'll start doing them. So, that's been huge in my world.
And I'll echo kind of the comments about more soft skills, leadership skills. In many of my experiences, I've found authenticity, especially as women, because we might sometimes feel pressure to be tougher than we really feel like we are, or softer than we really feel like we are. So finding who you are and just being authentic has been huge. And it took me a long time to figure that out, and some failures too in figuring that out. I think the example you gave was about moving careers, and I'm a horrible person to ask that, because I answered an ad when I was 21, and that's the only career decision I've ever made from a company standpoint. But I think it's really about soft skills is the biggest lesson that I've learned, is that authenticity, and also always develop your communication skills, because and especially in the supply chain, because everything is about communication and building relationships, and always developing and reaching for those opportunities.
Fantastic. So we have time for one last question, and then we're actually already past time. So, given that we're here where talent originates, we build the talent. So what can universities and the industry do together to address this, gender, diversity, the whole balance and the gap, in organizations? So, you have mentioned a lot of things that, the folks from the university, the upcoming talent can do. So if you could speak a little bit about, what you have seen in the industry outside of your companies, because everybody has mentioned that your companies is doing something in order to, promote diversity, promote gender diversity, cultural diversity. So how can we spread this knowledge and encourage other companies out there to actually make this mandatory, if you will? So if you could give us a flavor on what's happening, how could we do that?
Well,
Sure.
I think part of it is, I think you touched on it when you gave the example of going to the baseball game, right? So I think that women sometimes hold themselves back a little bit because we do want to, my kids all play soccer, and I want to be at every game, and I'm at almost every game. And it's never hurt me. It could have, depending on who my boss was, but it never has. I've just, maybe I've been lucky, maybe I've chosen my boss as well. So I think it really has to start from the top to make it okay to have some flexibility in your work life. And I think that's going to help, especially, it's not just women, it's moms and dads. I think being a parent is one of the things that leads to that gap, quite frankly. And I really think it has to come from the top that it's okay, to go to the baseball game. It's challenging. I don't know how to make it work at every company, but.
Yeah, I think, part of what's really important, though, that's very important, what you said, that you have to know that it's okay to do, but that doesn't mean it's okay not to do your job. Not to do your job. Your job still has to get done, but you do have some movement in how you do complete the job. And I think we said it before, you must pay it forward. Whether you pay it forward with another company, whether you pay it forward with another university or another session, you have to constantly be looking for how do you help those that are coming behind you get further. Right? So you should all get further than we have because you have the benefit of our knowledge.
And I would just be real and say it's hard work. And I think universities need to be honest about that. It's not easy work, it's hard work. It takes time to get a reputation in the industry. It takes time to build yourself and your skills. And it's very rewarding. So it's hard work, but it's very rewarding work. I think sometimes our universities err on it's going to be this wonderful, glorious, wonderful. No, it's not. There are tough times. No, it's not. It's tough, but it's very, very rewarding.
I would actually throw one other thing back in for universities would be, I think we all, men and women, need to get more aware of just the way differences. We have natural gender differences. I mean, apparently, I know I'm one of them. Women talk a lot more, right? But I think these kind of discussions need to start at university where everyone's pretty accepting of each other anyway, and we can start then understanding the perfection, the guilt, the drive, the desire, and instead of making it a competition, make it an understanding of the whole group, so that then when you get into the workforce, we just keep pushing that in. So that's something I would like to see.
Leverage what you do really well.
And then leverage and know your strengths. I think you should all come out knowing you're doing Strengths Finder or whatever the current version is, and know those.
But I want to come back on the soft skill, which I totally agree. As you learn, back to the previous question, what do you learn? It's really about the soft skill. Very often, everybody thinks, men and women, think about it's about knowing everything about transportation, logistics, you name it. That, when you're smart, and you are, if you come to a college, you usually acquire them. And so I think the university has to also think about that relationship, right? And sometimes university or colleges really go very deep on know-how, but I think those soft skills, I mean, frankly, when I came out of university, I was not at all prepared. And I think maybe you guys can help us.
Okay, fantastic. So it's time, we're way beyond time. I know it's a great conversation. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, panelists. This was great discussion.
Great job, guys.
Great panel.
Great point.